I felt like theater was this amazing girlfriend that I had in college, and then we broke up.
Welcome to another episode of Chewing the Fat. I am your host, Big Rob. Thank you so much for tuning in, downloading the podcast. I certainly do appreciate that. Thanks to the folks who have bought me a coffee at chewingthefatbr.com. Thank you to Shayna and also Allison. I really do appreciate that. It helps the podcast keep rolling. And the new friends I've met over at Chewing the Fat BR on Instagram as well. Thank you so much. And the folks that have written reviews and given the 5-star ratings, thank you. It means so much to a podcaster to know that what we're doing means something to someone. So thank you so much for being a part of this journey and this podcast with your reviews. I really do appreciate that. Of course, we have our guests in the show that we would not have a show without. Please welcome all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, if I am not mistaken, it is Brad Grochowski. Brad.
Hey, hi, Rob. How are you doing?
Good. It is Baltimore, right?
Yeah, you are not mistaken. Baltimore, Maryland. Just outside. I'm in Catonsville. So
okay.
For all the local Baltimoreans, don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I remember when the bridge tragedy happened, I reached out to you to make sure that you were like not, I'm sure that the area as a whole has been affected by that, but I was just making sure you specifically.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. Yeah, it's like if I'm at 9 o'clock around the Beltway, the bridge is at like 2 o'clock.
Okay.
So it's like on the far side of the city from me. And
gotcha.
I very rarely, it's probably been 20 years since I've crossed that bridge. It just, my life didn't take me across it. There used to be, what was it called? There was a big, City Lights. No. I don't remember. It was back in the mid 90s in the rave era. Remember when they used to have raves?
Yeah.
They would have big raves under the bridge.
Oh, okay.
I used to do live video projection. So I would have VCRs in those days, VCRs, a computer, and it would all feed into a analog mixing board, and I would mix it all and project it up on screens at raves and for bands and that sort of thing. And and Starlight Festival. Now I'm not remembering what it was called, but there was a big one under the bridge there, and it was super cool. Those were fun days. We would get into these big parties that we weren't cool enough to go to, right? But we would get in because we were the nerds with.
Right, you're the tech. You're the tech people.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
We had friends of mine. I'm on a rabbit hole, but
no, it's fine.
Friends of mine went to MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art, and one of them was a fabrics major, and she would make these huge inflatable sculptures, and she made this giant inflatable television, right? And it was probably 12 feet high by 15 feet wide by 25 feet long and inflated. And so effectively it was a big room on the inside, and they would get booked to do raves, and they would book us to do the projection. So we would be inside the TV and projecting onto the screen what we were mixing, but they would also let their friends in because it was like a private room inside of a rave, which was a pretty hard thing to come by,
right?
Like private space like that. And they would have bean bags all in there, and they would be dancing. So we would have a camera in there, and we would be mixing the dancing into the psychedelic, like stuff. And so it was a very interactive and immersive thing. It was pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah. And everyone around us was doing all kinds of drugs. And of course, we weren't, but we were, it's super fun creating entertainment for people who are balls out stoned. It's super fun. Like,
and it doesn't take much either. But
no, it doesn't. It doesn't. But they super appreciate what you're doing.
They really are. That's awesome. Brad is another voice actor that I met at VO Atlanta a few weeks ago. As we've had several new friends on the podcast here. I was in the bar at the Hilton Airport there after I think it was like Saturday night or whatever, kind of after all the major stuff had done. And um, Brad was actually talking to another podcaster, voice actor. And I heard him talking about being an introvert and the difficulties and things like that. And my ears just kind of pricked up. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry to like interrupt your conversation or whatever, but I feel like I need to talk to you. Because I consider myself kind of an ambivert, and I can be social when need to be, but once I get drained, I'm drained, and I'm just kind of done.
Yeah.
But knowing that Brad actually has a podcast about being an introvert in the voiceover industry called Inside Voice, which I was like, here's my card, here's your card, let's talk later, and then.
Yeah,
Brad,
I'm so glad you tapped me on the shoulder and started a conversation. Of course, that's what VO Atlanta is all about. VO Atlanta, I don't know if your listeners know, but it's a big voiceover conference in Atlanta. It's probably the biggest professional conference for voice actors in the world, I think. Which the world of voice acting is pretty small. So we're talking 1,000 attendees.
Right.
So relative to big conferences, it wasn't very big, but for the voiceover community, it's a pretty big deal. And it's great. And to make connections like that is what it's all about. And so I really appreciate that you tapped me on the shoulder.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And because for me, as even though I have this history in radio and doing voiceover unofficially, it was my first foray into a professional side of it, and it was such a welcoming community. And to meet people like yourself and just the other 999 folks that were there, and no one was very like off-putting about this noob that's walking around and doesn't know who anybody is, when these other people are like, oh my gosh, that's Karin Gilfrey. Do you realize it's like,
all of our heroes from, the big podcasters in the industry, the big coaches, all of the people that we really look up to are there. And they're just so accessible. Like you end up sitting next to them at lunch and having a conversation.
I ended up sitting next to Joe Cipriano, who I actually knew the name from radio because he was a big name in radio as far as like doing imaging for radio stations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I just sat next to him and I was like, oh my gosh. So he was kind of like the one that I knew, other than like, Maurice LaMarche, who was there as the keynote speaker, who was the voice of Brain from Pinky and the Brain from Animaniacs. And of course, so many other characters throughout his career. But for me, it was so cool to just feel welcomed. And, you were a part of welcoming me in by not like, hey, leave me alone, kid. I'm talking to this other guy.
Well, that's what I was thinking. That was my inside response. But
he's like, who the F? Yeah.
No. And it was cool because we had you as a guest on our podcast. It'll air on Monday, a week from today recording, not from when this releases, but what will Monday be? Today's the 4th. And it's
like the 8th or something,
Thursday.
April 8th or something like that.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
We usually put them out on Monday.
Yeah, so a few weeks back from when this airs, but yes.
Yeah, and it's hard. And I know we talked about this a little bit on air, but so Louise is my co-host. She's kind of the producer of the show. It was her idea, and she came to me and said, "We're really, really, really close friends." And we met through voiceover, and we just really she's my work buddy. You know what I mean? You always have that person at work that you're like this with, and you go to lunch together, and your coworkers are like, is there something, you're like, no, it's just clicked at work,
Yeah.
And she's amazing. She's so talented and so cool. She wouldn't let me say either of those things without arguing with me, but the podcast was really her idea, and she pulled me into it, and not that there wasn't much pulling that had to be done. I was super happy to do it. But we're both super busy. I mean, we're on the uphill, still the early climb. We've both been doing voiceover for about 3.5 years, and she's been full-time for a while. I've been full-time for 3 months. And so, but we're
Oh,
both
wow.
really just at that point in our career where you're grinding every single day. You're auditioning and auditioning and fulfilling and, doing the orders that you get and
Mm-hmm.
email marketing and networking and, uh, and trying to find agents and just so much work. Um, and then to try and manage a podcast on top of that. And a podcast itself is a lot of work. And
Yeah.
we've simplified stuff as much as we can. It's like we turn the microphone on when we start, we turn it off when we're done.
Yeah.
Unless there's something that happens in the course of the podcast, we don't stop and she doesn't edit it. It's just the
Yeah.
way it is. And that sort of honest and that genuine and that open, that's really what we were going for, especially
Yeah.
talking about a topic like introversion as a
Mm-hmm.
freelancer and as a voice actor. So,
Yeah.
but it was so good to have you on, and you were so kind and so gracious and such a good host, and the conversation was just lovely. So,
Well,
yeah, we
thank you.
really really appreciate having you. Looking forward to getting that one.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it myself. I'm one of those people who's, have you realized that, like, as you've gotten into voiceover, it seems like everybody, they're like, oh, I hate the sound of my voice. I hate to hear myself recorded. I'm like, I kind of like the sound of my voice. I've gotten used to it for, 30 something years, my recorded voice. So it doesn't bother me.
No, I know. And I think the reason my hypothesis anyways is that our voices don't sound externally the way we hear them in our head, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so a normal person who's not accustomed to hearing their voice will speak and they'll be expecting one voice because it's the voice in their head, but they'll hear a different voice recorded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. But once you've worked with your voice enough, that kind of gets corrected, right? That gets sort of filtered out. Like, I know what my voice sounds like. I know how to control what I communicate with my voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you also learn to bring those two things closer together, like what I hear of my voice in my head and what the microphone picks up.
Yeah.
Those come closer and closer together too. And so I think between those things, no, I don't, like, you couldn't get by in this career or radio or podcasting if you cringed when you heard your own voice the way most people do.
Right.
And so yeah, that's a good question, but
like I said, I think it's a learned skill, because you just have to, this is what you want to do. You have to get used to it. And where, like you said, people just aren't used to hearing their recorded voice and what that sounds like, or being able to, optimize it or affect it so that it sounds differently based on the, the product you're doing, whether if you're doing a children's narration for a book or you're doing a hard sell, automotive commercial or whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, that's right. And in fact, I feel like you have to learn, because you have to hear I'm doing a kids e-learning podcast about Italian history. It's so cool. It's they go back and the narrator goes back in time and explores the Mona Lisa in one episode, or the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or Spartacus. But I'm also doing the sound design for it. So I'm adding all kinds of sound elements. So I'm hearing my voice a lot, because if you were uncomfortable with that, it just wouldn't work. Right. And even just you do an audition, you got to listen back to it to make sure it's right and you haven't missed anything and your interpretation reads the way you meant it to.
Yeah.
So you have to, you have to. In fact, you have to, I think, learn to enjoy your own voice, and
not any weird narcissistic type of way.
Yeah, I was going to say to an extent, because people who love their voice, and that gets a little, ostentatious. No, you know it. You can hear it.
Yeah, right.
I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. So Brad, you're in Baltimore. Did you grow up in the Baltimore area?
No. I grew up in rural northern Michigan, in Alpena, Michigan,
where the winters are cold and the women are colder.
Yeah, and the summers are short and the men are shorter.
Right.
I just made that up. I just added to what you had there. I'm pretty impressed with myself for that. Uh, uh, yeah. So I grew up in the hinterlands, up in deer hunting country
Hmm.
and farm country, and I put those two together. I think uh, not intentionally, but we would spend our summers or late summers baling hay at Uncle Butch's farm, so that we could then. That was sort of our trade off to deer hunt in the fall
Okay.
with my dad. I'm not a hunter now.
Right.
But that was the culture growing up, and all of the schools closed for the first day of deer season,
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
yeah.
Were you interested? I know you have a theatrical background. Did that start in, in like grade school or high school or?
No, it so yeah, in high school I really wanted to do theater, and I would see all the other theater kids doing theater. And we didn't have like a super intensive theater program or anything in my high school. We
Hmm.
had a drama club like a lot of schools do. But I assumed for some reason, I mean, this is me. I'd still do this to myself. For some reason, I assumed everyone else had lots of experience, and what did I know? And I mean, I'm looking at other, 14-year-olds. Like, what?
Right.
We're,
He's got
we're
30
like,
years experience on me. He's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
14.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I just let myself be intimidated by it. And I was on track and band, and I had
Okay.
enough
Okay.
other things going on. And but in college, I was in community college, and I was in the drawing class, and I was 10 minutes late for the drawing class, 15 minutes, well, maybe 15, knowing me, probably 15 minutes late at the time. I worked so hard on timeliness and promptness.
Okay.
I'm so much better now. But at the time, I was a nutball. I just didn't know how to manage that. So I was 10 to 15, probably 15 or 20 minutes late for this drawing class. And I came racing into the class, nobody there, completely empty. I'm like, what the heck? And I thought, well, sometimes we would leave the class and go draw around that part of the campus, right?
Hmm.
This is at Alpena Community College in my hometown, right?
Okay.
And so I'm like, well, I'll see if I can find them. And I start wandering around the building and peeking indoors. And I opened a door, and there was one person that I'd gone to high school with and a few other people. And they're Kathleen Pingle and Kathy Pingle. And they waved me in. They're like, Brad, come on in. I'm like, I'm trying to find my class. And they're like, well, what time was your class? And I'm like, oh, it started at 1. And they're like, Brad, it's noon. So
Oh, wow.
15 minutes late, an hour early. That I'm
Mm.
telling you,
Mm.
I was a nutball when it came to like time and getting to places on time and managing myself.
Yeah.
Much better. Ask my wife. Even my wife would say, yeah, he's figured it out.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was the community college drama club,
Hmm.
like the beginnings of it. They were forming it, and they were talking about doing a show. And I'm like, they're actually going to do this. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I sat in and I was like, I didn't think too much about it. And they're like, well, Brad, come back next week. Okay. It's, we meet an hour before your art class. So it's perfect. And they were trying to just get members, right? It was like,
right.
I'm like, maybe, yeah, no. And I didn't commit, but then I did. I came back the next week and the next week and the next week. And then I auditioned, and it was for a collection of 10-minute one acts.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like a short play festival or something like that.
Yeah. They were doing 10 of them. And that's, for new actors in a community college, that's a great way to start because they're manageable, they're bite size, right? So I auditioned, and they cast me in, I think, 8 of the 10. Not because I was an amazing actor. I think because I was one of the few guys that auditioned.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that was,
Yeah. It happens that way sometimes.
yeah, but I took that, right? And I ended up not being able to do all 8 of them, but I think I did a fair number of them anyway, and loved it so much. I thought, how did it take me till I was only, 19 at the time to find this?
Mm.
Because it just scratched so many of those itches for me. It was, I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't even know what I didn't know then, right?
Right.
But just it was just something I could dig into. It just fit my mental process. I love doing things iteratively. I love doing it once. fucking it up, doing it again, fucking it up, doing it again.
Yeah.
And just getting it incrementally better and better each time. And in theater, you get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You get to, the first read through is not, it's supposed to suck, right? Like
Right.
that's the whole point of it. And then you sort of iteratively through the rehearsal process get better and better. And I got to just ingest language and just bite into these things. And again, I didn't even know what I was doing then. But it just felt so good and I just enjoyed it and it just fit. It just was like click. And then I went away to 4-year college. I was going to get major in psychology. That was my plan. I was taking psych classes at community college, and my parents were all behind that, and that sounded good. Thank God. Thank God I found this other thing. I love psychology. I still, watch YouTube videos and read articles, and I still love it. But a career in psychology as a therapist is just, and I didn't want to be a psychiatrist because you're a medical doctor. That was way more.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be a therapist or probably children's therapist was what I really wanted to do. But now, as having an adult understanding of what that means, I thank God I found something different that I was passionate about. Because what a needed and what a just an essential role to play in our culture, especially children's therapy. But how undervalued and unappreciated. And I understand now that would have been working with kids through abuse and through just horrible family situations. And I think in the end, I'm just a little too emotional for that, a little too empathic for that. And I think it would have been really challenging for me. And plus, when I was in the tech industry before this, I said, I worked in tech support, and I was making my salary and doing my job. And I thought, let me look at therapy because I'm not super happy with my job. What if I wanted to become a therapist or a social worker or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked, it would be 6 more years of college to make $20,000 less a year than what I was making.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, ooh, no, that wouldn't work.
Yeah. So you found community theater, you found this. So is that what you then is that what you ended up with a degree in or anything?
Yeah. So then I wasn't even going to audition. And another good friend of mine came up to me and she said, Brad, I'm going down to audition for Western Michigan University. I'd already been accepted for their psych program. She's like, you're already going there. Why don't you just drive down with me and we'll audition? And I put a couple monologues together and got a little coaching for that and went down and got accepted. And it was amazing.
Yeah.
And worked my way up there. And, my 3rd year there, I played Romeo and Juliet, which was an amazing, terrifying, fantastic experience. I wish I knew. I wish, you have those things where if you just knew then what you know now,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just wish. And we got good reviews. I think everyone was happy with it. It was a really cool, interesting production of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then but then what do you do? I had 1 more year, and what do you do after that? Like you've played Romeo, like unless you were doing Hamlet, but I wasn't Hamlet. I was Romeo. I wasn't Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was 22, but I looked 15 or 16. I was a skinny little ingenue boy.
Right.
So I directed an opera. Some other students who I became very close with, they had written an opera and they wanted to produce it, but the theater department wouldn't touch it. The music department wouldn't touch it. So they were looking for a student to produce it, and I did. And it was about Baba Yaga. So it was a lot of Russian folklore, and it's very, very cool, very cartoonish, but with a lot of sort of historical and folkloric depth to it. It shouldn't have happened at all. It shouldn't. It was a big project as a college senior, directing something written by other college. It shouldn't have happened, but it did by sheer will, and it was an amazing experience. And then it was all downhill from there for theater. I graduated and moved to Chicago and loved Chicago, but especially then in the middle 90s, it was not a good city to live in if you were a broke actor who didn't really.
Mm.
I was working at Radio Shack. I just didn't have. I was burnt out on theater, and
Oh, wow.
I didn't have. I just didn't. I didn't have a lot of motivation at that point.
Yeah.
I just wanted to work a job. I ended up temping, and I just wanted to work a job for a while. That worked for a while, and I was still doing. At that point, computers were at a point where you could start to do creative stuff with them.
Yeah.
And I had Adobe. What was the movie editing? The Adobe's
Premiere.
Adobe Premiere. And I was doing a lot of just sort of in my little studio apartment. I'd walk the streets of Chicago for hours and hours with a video camera I'd saved up with my temping money. It was like the one thing that I was able. I was so broke, man. But I'd saved. A little spreadsheet I'd saved up to buy this video camera, and I would just walk around for hours just shooting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very little of it of any interest at all. And then I would come home and I would put stuff together, and that's kind of when I started doing the video that we were talking about at the top of the show. That led to that. But I wasn't doing any theater. It was really hard in Chicago at that time. All the kids were coming down from Northwestern, which is a world-renowned undergraduate school for theater. And so they were all coming down from Northwestern and opening their own theaters, and they all had their own cliques and stuff. And I don't begrudge them for a minute because that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't feel like they needed me.
Mm.
But I would come to visit my friends in Baltimore. And at the time, Baltimore had this really active performance art community, the scene. It was a
Mm-hmm.
scene like
Mm-hmm.
you'd see in a movie, right? Like but nobody became famous out of it, so there won't be any movies made. But it was a scene, and all these kids from Micah and University of Baltimore, all these art kids, visual art kids, were doing performance art, kind of like 60s stuff, but they were mixing video in with it and inflatables like we talked about, and just doing this really just interesting stuff. And so here I'm coming done with theater, like just burnt out on it. And here's these kids doing this crazy stuff, but none of them knew anything about theater or performance. And so I would walk in with that as my background.
Mm-hmm.
And they just sort of would mix me into stuff. And can I'd be here for the weekend, and they'd say, "Could you come back in 2 weeks because we're doing the?" Well, I couldn't. So I moved down here. It was way more interesting. My friends and we had a 10,000 square foot warehouse space. That was the 5th floor of a building that was. Our artists had all of the other one's first floor through 6th floor.
So
and,
I don't want to interrupt you, but yeah. I mean, it's like, as you talk about this, it seems like you lived the musical Rent before there was a musical Rent. You were Mark Cohen, and you had your camera and you were taking videos, and then you had all the people in the warehouse that were doing all the artistic things.
I will confess, I have never seen Rent.
Go to Wikipedia, read the synopsis, and go, "Holy crap, that was my life." I'm just telling you. See, I did theater, but I did more, especially now, is staying into like community theater. It's more musical theater. I mean, I've done some straight plays and stuff like that, but I do enjoy a good musical theater performance and stuff like that. So just trust me. Okay. Look at the synopsis for Rent. And then I want you to text me after you've read it and be like, "Oh, okay, I can see that connection there."
Maybe there's there's a reason for this sort of cosmic blind spot that has kept me from seeing it, because like the cosmos, the universe theory. I was talking about the universe theory. I'm an atheist. I don't, I believe in what I have evidence for, but sometimes there are things where you just want to attribute something to someone, and so I usually look to the universe fairy as the to give attribution for when something miraculous, or usually a little ironically, but still that's my little pet non-atheist treat that I allow myself.
Yeah.
So maybe the universe fairy was like, yeah, if you see this, it's going to ruin everything for you because it's too close to home.
Yeah. And then you're going to be like, who stole my story?
Yeah. Or then I'll be too deliberate, or I'll feel like the outcome of that show sort of will predetermine my life. And I know enough about that show that I don't want that. So
yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's great. So
even on a metaphorical level, I don't. Yeah.
right. Just even, I don't want, yeah, I get that. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. So you're now in Baltimore. You've got the warehouse. You're doing all this art stuff. And
and I built a little stage performance area there, and we rented out space to other artists for, studio space. And that was fun. And, that's fun when you're in your early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you've had 3 or 4 years of, oh boy, because I don't want to say there were no rules, but I would come home from, I would be visiting my family for the weekend, and I would come home on Sunday at 11 o'clock, and I had to work in the morning, and I was just dead. But then there was a band starting at 11:30 right outside my bedrooms. And it was just the lifestyle, and it was awesome while it was awesome.
La vie bohème.
What's that?
La vie bohème.
Yeah. But we all it got a little tough.
Yeah.
And so, I moved out, and then I met my first wife, and we got married and had my son, and then got unmarried, and I met my current wife, and yeah. And in the meantime, I worked at Center Stage as an assistant company manager for a little while. And that was one of the worst jobs I ever had. That was terrible.
Sorry to hear that.
Company management is awful for those who don't know. Mm-hmm. So stage managers, everybody knows what a stage manager does. They manage everything that happens on the stage with the cast. Company managers manage everything that happens with the cast off stage. So that meant all of the contracting, but it also meant Center Stage is a what do you call it?
Equity
house? Yeah, it's an equity house, and it's a LORT theater. It's a regional. Mm-hmm. And so all of our actors were coming in from New York, and they would stay. We had apartments. And so as the assistant company manager, the company manager was in charge of deciding who was staying in which apartments. The assistant company manager was in charge of getting all their shit in their apartments and making sure they had clean linens and doing the laundry, after they left. Not their laundry, but the linens and all of that.
Yeah.
It was awful. And it was heartbreaking because I had no less training than the actors who were coming through. I had just made a different choice, right? Like I just chose not to be a professional regional actor, right? Like not to pursue that, I should say. And, but to just, they were all lovely with one exception, but I'm not going to say who it was. They were all lovely actors, lovely people, but there is still a caste system there. And I don't mean caste, but I mean,
with an E on the end. Yeah.
With an E on the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just really hard and heartbreaking because none of them knew what my background was, that had I made a few different choices, I very well may be standing with them, but instead I'm driving them to the chiropractor and I don't know, maybe it was ego. I try to live ego-free life as much as I can. It's impossible. But that's a goal. And so maybe some of that, but you could only set that aside for so long. And I did it for a while, and it was tough. It was really hard for me.
Yeah. Yeah. But so getting out of that toxic environment.
Yeah.
Again, and that's one of those hard things when it's something that you love, but you see the dirty kind of underbelly side of it, and it's like, oh, this is the crap that I didn't see on the other side that I really loved about this. But it takes both sides to make the machine work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guy who did the job before me loved it. And I'm sure the guy who worked after, or the woman loved it. But for me, it was just a horrible fit. I was miserable. And that just put the last nail in the coffin for me on theater. I was I felt like at that point, theater, and still kind of do, like, I felt like theater was this amazing girlfriend that I had in college, and then we broke up.
Yeah.
and we'd like hang out every now and then to
Right.
see, and we'd both be like, "No, I love you, and it breaks my heart that we can't be together, but I kind of just can't deal with your shit."
Yeah.
Right. And that's what and I still feel that way a little bit.
uh, you have this desire to be creative, to
Mhm.
entertain within you. I mean, I can see it on your face. Like it's in the trail of your past. It's
The trail
everything
of
that
my
you.
past. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, it's like it's these little breadcrumbs all throughout your history that all have to do with entertainment and performing, and for you to to find something now
Hmm.
like voice acting, to be able to connect the best parts of all of those things into something that you can absolutely love. That's, I mean, that's what I'm hearing from you, from your
And make a
history.
living doing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is all uh, silver lining. 100% appreciate how tragic it was and how many people lost. But it was COVID that put me where I am. I was playing with my band. We had just recorded our first teeny tiny album. It's a it's on a 45. It's I think 9 songs, but they're all 2 seconds to a minute long, I think.
Two
Uh,
seconds.
yeah, the shortest track is 2 seconds, I think.
Okay.
Um, and we had printed it to vinyl, and
Oh, wow.
it's on all the streaming. It's
Mm-hmm. What's
Stanley
the name of the
Bothered
band?
Stanley Bothered and the Very Serious Band's teeny tiny album. So you can hear it. And then COVID hit, and we couldn't practice. There were some um immuno what do you call it? Yeah,
Compromise.
immunocompromised issues. So we couldn't even practice anymore, let alone play out. And while we were in the darkness of all of that, I got someone emailed me about a um audio drama, and I auditioned for that and got a part in it and thought, I wonder if there's more to that. And I started looking into it. I
Mm-hmm.
assumed, I think a lot of people might, but I assumed this is sort of the same thinking that I had in high school. I had assumed that you had to be a super fancy, and you had to live in LA or you had to live in New York,
Yeah.
and you had to like have a limousine driver come get you to take you to the studio. Like I assumed that's what the life of
Right.
a voice actor was, right?
Right.
Turns out only the top 3% live that life. But
Mm-hmm.
I started to find that the it was possible to work from your home as a voice actor and to build your own studio. And I knew from my years working with computers and audio equipment and video equipment, I knew I had all of the technical skills I needed. I just needed to, you know, figure out the
Yeah.
specifics. And I had the performance background. And so it just sort of fit. And it felt like that first audition for theater back in community college. It was that same, like, it snapped into place. So I think I'm in the right place. I
Yeah.
think I am.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love it so much.
That's
It's such a good fit for me.
that's so cool. So aside from the voice acting and the hustle and everything like that, how do you unwind? What do you like to do outside of that if you have time to do that? I mean, so like what's bringing you joy?
Yeah, thanks. I've been thinking about that a lot. I'll be honest. That's really actually a timely question. Having just transitioned from, so I was working over 40 hours a week at a very sort of intense, emotionally demanding job, and I would finish at 5, and I would spend a couple hours having dinner with my wife or having dinner with my son who lives with his mom. He's
Mhm.
20, so it's not like he's 12. He's 20, and
Right.
he and his mom are roommates essentially. Um, so spend a couple hours with my wife or with my son. And then I would come back down to the studio and I would work from 8 until 2 in the morning. And
Mm.
dude, as much as I love doing it, I did that for about 3 years, and it was
Mm.
hard. And So now that I've built my business up and I built my income from voiceover up enough that I was comfortable leaving my my day job,
Mm-hmm.
it's not much different, except now I'm usually in the studio around 9 and I finish around 5:30, but I'm spending that time doing voiceover instead of doing my day job. And then I usually come back down 8 or 9, but I don't have to, I'm not up as late. Like I'm just, if I have a thing to finish up or I need to
Mm-hmm.
getting stuff out. Um, so I have more bandwidth now and I'm spending a lot more time with my wife
Mm.
and that was challenging. Um,
Yeah.
there were definitely some challenging points in our relationship when you're that committed to something. But my God, Rob, I don't know how to say it other than there is nothing in my life that I've ever wanted more or worked harder for than to succeed at this. And you have to because it's so competitive. It's so challenging and it's so much hard work. But but now I have more bandwidth and I can take an afternoon to have
Mm-hmm.
a podcast chat with you. And it's amazing. Like I couldn't have done this before. And so I've started to think about what really makes me happy. Like what do I really enjoy? Like what brings me joy? I don't
Yeah.
mean um I don't know. Like I play some video games. I really like Baldur's Gate and
Mm.
that's sort of my treat. Like if I have all of my work done and I have auditioned enough that day, like I've gotten all the auditions done that I needed to get done and all my marketing I got done that I had planned. I use a Trello board and so I know what I need to get done.
Nice.
Uh, um, then, and if it's not too late, then I can spend a little time in Tamriel and Baldur's Gate, throwing around some doppelgangers. No spoilers meant, but
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
may be some doppelgangers as well. So, but does that really bring me joy? I don't know, and that's kind of what I'm going through right now. I love spending time with my wife, and I love spending time
Yeah.
with my son. I love robots, and I love sci-fi, and so I like reading classic vintage sci-fi from the 50s. And if you saw my studio, it's all filled with robots and puppets and musical instruments and stuff. And I love music, but I haven't really gotten back to it since COVID. I'm not a
Yeah.
musician. Uh,
Mm.
and if you listen to my album, you may be like, yeah, he's right. But but I was a performer using music as a means to perform, right? And so
Right.
I had a lot of catch up to do. I was taking piano lessons and voice lessons and really taking that pretty seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the Circle of Fifths was just on the edge of
Yeah.
mysterious to me, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
just beyond what I understood as far as what I was able to. I could do key change. I got to a point where I could use a circle of fifths to create a key change in a song and
Mm-hmm.
it hit.
Mm.
So that's something I think about a lot right now. And I don't really have a good answer other than, traveling with my wife and going to Chipotle with my son for dinner on a Thursday and playing Baldur's Gate or watching a show on some sci-fi show on Netflix.
All right, Brad. So this is the second segment of the show. This is time now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into your mental health journey. I believe that, we all kind of go through those days, whether you have diagnosed depression or anxiety or whatever. I think it's something that we all deal with, whether we want to admit it out loud or not. And the more that we talk about it, the easier it is for all of us to realize that we're not alone in that. So for you, how do you keep the darkness at bay?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming. First of all, I'll say I'm not diagnosed with anything. That doesn't mean I don't know. I probably have some ADD or adult ADD or ADHD undiagnosed stuff to some degree. My ex-wife, as we were getting divorced, she's like, I think you have adult ADD. You should really, I'm like, oh, maybe. And then a year or so later, talking to my now my wife and told her, she's like, yeah, she's just your ex-wife and she blah, 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 blah. Now, 10 years later, my wife's like, yeah, maybe she had a point there. So I don't know. I probably need to look into that. I don't know I don't know if I do keep the darkness at bay, honestly. And we talked about this a little bit on our podcast when we had you there. I I mean, I don't know that I do. I tend to just open up and let it in and ride it out,
Mhm.
man. Like
Mhm.
I I'm 50, I'll be 52 this year. So I'm not saying I have any answers, but I'm old enough to know that I don't have answers, right?
Mhm.
I think that's where wisdom comes from, is like being old enough and that you don't know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've had a lot of experience with what tends to work for
Yeah.
me. And I've found in my life that really facing, like accepting the
Mm.
darkness. And I think an example of that was the divorce, going through the divorce. And our marriage was, in some ways, it was great, and I didn't think it should end, but in other ways, it definitely should have. And regardless, I didn't have any say in the matter, so it wasn't my
Yeah.
choice. And that was very painful at first, until I don't remember all of the steps of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, but there's denial and
Right. Right.
blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm booking through these as fast as I can because this is
Yeah.
bullshit. So, but I let that pain come in and I said, hey, I see you, man, and you don't feel very good. Let's sort this out and figure out why it hurts and what it really is about
Yeah.
this situation that's painful to you. Had I kept pushing it away, had I kept saying, I don't feel it, I don't feel it, I don't want to feel it, I'm going to drink so I don't feel it, I'm going to do drugs so I don't feel it, I'm going to bury myself in other women so I don't feel it,
Mhm.
um, it would have taken years. And instead, it took, uh, you know, from when I understood for real that she was leaving,
Mhm.
it was much, much more. I was able to manage the the process it much more quickly than I would have been had I been avoiding it. So I really think, and I took a lot from that lesson wise, and I took a lot from the idea that if you acknowledge and accept the darkness and the pain, now that's setting aside the realities of mental health, right?
Mhm.
And I understand that that's a privileged place and a privileged outlook to have, because I understand that there are people who, were they to indulge themselves in the darkness, that it could take them to some very difficult
Yeah.
places. I recognize and acknowledge that, but that's not
Yeah.
me, right? For me to to just let it come in and live with it and own it and partner with it.
Mhm.
That sounds weird, but to partner with that darkness or the pain or the fear or the anxiety, um, is the best way, to live with it.
Mhm.
And I still, we all do. I'll have, it's usually triggered by, at this point, triggered by work, but right. Like if I'm auditioning and I'm not getting any responses, I'm not getting any positive feedback from it, I'm not getting any work, I know the end of the month is coming and I know what I wanted to earn this month and I didn't, like, then I start to just get this icky
Right.
feeling. But again, I understand that happens, and I'm able to at least try to acknowledge it, understand why it's there, and move through it instead of trying to juke around
Yeah.
it.
Well,
So,
and that, I mean, that is in its own way, you know, accepting the darkness, is a way to keep it at bay as well. I tell folks all the time, that I was the fat kid. I started to own the name fat, so that you
mm-hmm,
couldn't hurt me with it.
mm-hmm,
So those times when you're down and for you to go, hey, darkness, depression, I see you there. I recognize you
mm-hmm.
there. I want to learn from this time that I'm in, from this moment that you're here for whatever reason. What is the lesson I can learn from you
Mhm.
in this? And then move through that and keep going, you know. Uh
Yeah.
So I definitely
Yeah.
understand
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And shadows are scary,
Mm,
right? And you can either say those shadows are scary, I don't want to know what it is, or you can say those shadows are scary, I'm going to shine my flashlight on them and find out.
exactly.
And and again, this may be a completely privileged position to be in, but in my life, I've found that when I shine the flashlight on that shadow, it's far less scary than what my imagination had built it
Right.
up to be. And I know there are people who, there are actual demons out there that are stalking them down, and that's a whole different scenario. So don't listen to me if you're one of those people. Like, I guess, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I don't,
but I think you can still shine the light on that, too,
yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm recognizing that this thing is really, you know, got me in, in a chokehold.
I imagine. Yeah.
How can I release this chokehold?
Yeah.
There's, I definitely think that recognizing when you're in a situation helps you then realize I need to get out of this. I need to
Yeah.
figure out a way out of this, so
Yeah.
I think the recognition part of it is a key, step in any of those things that might be weighing down on you. It's not
Yeah.
you. It's what's the cause of this,
Yeah, and you can spend a lot of time sort of following that down, right? Like and understand and trying to understand where fear comes from and where anxiety comes from, and it's so human,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so it has been evolutionarily necessary for our survival.
Mm.
And we now live in a world where it's not necessarily evolutionarily necessary for our survival in most cases. But we still have it, and we still, like, if you're a early human and you hear rustling in the bushes, you can either be afraid and run away. Maybe it wasn't a lion, but you're alive. Maybe it was a lion, you're still alive. If you weren't afraid, if you didn't have that anxiety, and it was a lion, you got et.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just part of being human, and it's necessary, but we're programmed for a whole different environment. And so now we project that, or we misplace or displace those same survival instincts onto things that not not getting as many short lists on your auditions isn't the same as keeping yourself from being eaten by a lion.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have lions roaming around anymore, so that same mechanism just gets reassigned.
Yeah.
Right. And we still have the same fear and the same anxiety. So that's my thoughts on it.
It's the third segment of the show. It's time now for the Fast Five. The Fast
I
Five.
don't like.
It's time now for
I
the
don't like
Fast
random.
Five.
Like,
Fast Five. Look, I mean,
oh, sorry.
I
talked over
no,
your
that's
song. I'm
fine.
sorry.
That's fine. It's like
I forgot that
I just do it live. Because I don't have a.
I love it. No, I love it. I think you should keep doing that. I don't like random. And we were talking about iterative, like enjoying things iterative. And I like to know what I've done and how to make it better. I was in an improv troupe for a while.
Well, there you go.
Loved it in some ways, but was miserable in other ways. Like, it was not my style of performance.
Well, unfortunately for you, that's what this segment is. The Fast Five. 5 random questions.
Seriously, dude, I gotta go. I got a bunch of stuff to get done.
Well, I guess this episode just won't air then. So, because
okay. All right, do your worst.
All right,
man.
here we go. Fast Five is powered by Poddex, an app created by my friend Travis Brown. If you go to chewingthefatpr.com/Poddex, it'll take you to the links to download it yourself. 5 questions, no wrong answers. I don't understand it. It's no wrong answers. So no stress at all in this. Okay. So here we go. Question number 1. What would you like to accomplish in the coming year?
Oh Lord. Just to continue building my business to the point where I you in this business you're always
Yeah,
hustling. But I think you reach a point where you're not hustling just to like make you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um I would like to by the end of the year feel a little more comfortable with where I am in my monthly revenue um and where my business
Yeah.
is as my voiceover
No,
business.
that's great. I
Yeah.
think that's great.
All right, this is easier than I thought.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Question number 2. What's the most annoying bill you have to pay?
Um so I part of being able to leave my day job was that I had to have all of my debts paid.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't by the time I left I had no car payment, no student loan. We have a mortgage on the house, but that's it. No credit card debt.
Mm-hmm.
I've trained myself to be a really good credit card person. These are all again
I
really privileged position to be in. I know a lot of people are really struggling, and I feel for them, and I've been there. Oh man, I used to be. We were talking about me being always late for things, but financially, I had no clue what was going on, and I worked really, really hard to be a grown
well,
up about those
I
things.
commend you on that. I think that's great. And truthfully, your point of view is very valid on the fact that you're appreciative of the things that you now can pay for and don't find annoying that do
Yeah,
help you do your things. I think it's great.
yeah.
I think it's great. All right, question number 3. Ooh, if someone made a movie about your life, who would play you? I always do this one in a 2-part. Who would actually get the job, but who would you want to play you? That's 2 different people, usually.
Yeah. Um, maybe I would want Bob Odenkirk to play me just because he's
Mm.
so fucking cool, and he would have to like, because if he's gonna play me, he would have to spend some time like shadowing me and interviewing me, right? So just to get to hang out with Bob Odenkirk for a few hours for as he's preparing for the role would be make it worth it. I don't know who would pay me. Who's Zach Galifianakis
There you go.
maybe uh um oh what's his name? Oh, I can't remember his name. He was just in what's his name? I really like him. He he was okay. This is gonna be a little journey. He was in the movie some years ago where they were in like the Sonoma Valley. It was like about wine and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, crap. And he was just in a movie where he played a historical guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Do we know which historical guy? That will help. There are a lot of historical guys out there.
it was a guy,
Oh,
and he
okay.
was history.
Guy from
Um,
history.
Paul
Giamatti? No. Oh,
Giamatti.
well.
That's
Oh,
what I'm
okay.
thinking.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I think he'd have a good shot at getting the role.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be good. That'd be good.
He'd have to get the beard
Mm.
if he could get the
Mm.
beard. That would be
He was
important.
great. If you've not seen The Holdovers, he was amazing in that
Mm.
movie. If you haven't, I don't know if you're a movie guy, but he was amazing in The Holdovers. But I could see that.
Yeah,
It's-
I looked at that. Yeah, I think he would stand a good chance of getting cast. If his agent handled it.
Right. We're like, hey, we got the script.
Because I mean, we got Bob Odenkirk over here.
That's
That's
true.
just like chomping.
That's true. That's true. All right. Question number 4. If you could pick only one lesson to tell a new business owner,
Mm.
and it could be, a voiceover business owner, someone starting a voiceover, you could tell them one lesson, what would it be?
If it's a business where coaching is available, as it is in voiceover, find a good, reputable coach And if not, find a mentor, find somebody who's in the business that has some generosity. Hopefully it's not a cutthroat business. And listen to them. Like work with them. That's the number one thing. Like everything else can follow, but you can't, because here's the problem. Okay. This is something I faced in voiceover when everybody does. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you're not looking for somebody to give you all the information. You're looking for someone to help you sort out, to help you understand what you don't know, so you can then start to educate yourself. Even with all of my background in theater and performing and music, which all helped me, it's all beneficial coming into voiceover. But I did not know what I didn't know. And so it's only been through coaching that I've been able to unlearn a lot of the things from live theater that aren't helpful and learn the things that I need to know. So that's what I would say. Find a mentor or a good coach to help you find the things that you don't know, and then you can start to fill in the gaps from there. And hopefully they can help you with the things you don't know, but
yeah,
that's the first step.
I love that. That's great. And question number 5. Where do you go when you need to blow off some steam?
I used to go to Tamriel, but now I go to Baldur's Gate.
Okay.
I love immersive games. And Skyrim, I love that game. I've often said, if all of a sudden video game technology stopped and Skyrim was the only game that was ever left forever, I would be okay with that. Right. Now that Baldur's Gate is a thing, if I had a choice between the two, it would still be Baldur's Gate. I mean, it would still be Skyrim. Okay. But I don't know. So I like to disappear into video game worlds, and that's what I like most about games, is you can kind of like live in a different world for a little while.
Yeah. Love that.
I could say I like to go out in nature and go on hikes and go for long exercise walks, but those would be lies.
I think your answer was great. And that is our Fast 5. And that is the show, Brad. Thank you so much. Fast.
Thank you so much for indulging me. I'm a little embarrassed to have spoken of myself for so long, but I guess that's why I'm here.
That is. It's
Louise is good at reining me in. As you know from being on the show, I tend to rabbit hole a little bit, and she's really good at like pulling me back on topic and keeping things moving forward.
Well, the thing is I wanted to get to know more about you, and that's exactly what you did. You help us get to know more about you and where you're at and what you've got going on. And if folks want to keep up with you, what's the best way they can do that?
They can go to thevoiceofbrad.com, which is funny because you're the voice of rob.com.
Yeah.
Purely coincidence, I assume.
It is. It is. I didn't realize that until like you.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thevoiceofbrad.com, and from there you can get to my somewhat neglected Instagram, my completely neglected TikTok. I love LinkedIn now, and I'm on Facebook. And
okay.
Yeah, and our podcast is Inside Voice, Freelance and Voiceover Success as an Introvert. Turns out there's a couple other podcasts with very similar names. So, and I just wrapped the last episode of my personal podcast was Gentleman Spaceman's Atomic Hideout, and every episode I narrate a short story of 1940s, 50s, 60s from science fiction golden age.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I just enough projects going on that I released the last episode Tuesday, and I was like, yeah, that's the end of the season of season 2, and I think it's going to be the end of the podcast for a little while. Yeah. Well, that's great, though. I will definitely make sure that we put the links to all of those things in the show notes so that folks can keep up with you and what you've got going on.
Yeah, thanks.
And of course, folks can find you.
Thank you so much. It was really wonderful being able to talk to you today and the other day when you were visiting us. I really appreciated that.
Absolutely.
And,
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're connected now.
Yeah,
and I'm
sure.
glad we're gonna stay best friends and really stay in touch.
Absolutely, you sure are. We sure are.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you being here and being open. I wish you nothing but success in all that you've got going on and the stuff that you want to happen this year happens. And I'm going to be calling you and asking you questions about how I can make that stuff happen for me too.
Yeah, we'll get you going.
Because I need to get that going.
We'll get you going.
So I really appreciate it, Brad. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you would like to support this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you bought me a coffee at chewingthefatbr.com. But until next time, I look forward to the chance we have to sit a spell and chew the fat.